5 minutes? 5 minutes? Okay, thank you. Oh, I have to go live here. I forgot. Hi. Jeff put the number in there already. So you can call him, yeah, in about 4 minutes. Yeah, and call him about 4 minutes. We go live in about 4 minutes. Yeah. Thank you. So, what am I going to talk about today? Do I know? Yeah. Well, I have my guess, right? Okay. 2 minutes? Okay. Can they hear on my Facebook page? Not yet. Can you turn it so they can hear it? No. Oh, they c- they can hear it now. Oh, it doesn't. I don't know if they can. It doesn't. Oh, okay. He says regulated. It's not regulated. It's relegated. It's relegated. He says regulated.
Warning, the following program has been rated T for truth.
You can't handle the truth!
Oh, we think you can. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report with your host, truth warrior and mythbuster Kathleen Wells. The place where we distinguish fact from fiction, where data is used to drive points home, and where Kathleen takes the position that Democrats and black politicians have destroyed Black America. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. Now, your host, Kathleen Wells.
Welcome. I don't think you can hear me. Can you hear me? Not yet? Oh, now you can hear me. I can tell when you can hear me because I can hear me in the headphones. But when you can't hear me in the headphones, I know you can't hear me. Anyway, hi. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. This is me, Kathleen, your host. And what do I want to say? Oh, I want to say that I'm live streaming on YouTube. So you can go to the YouTube channel, the Naked Truth Report YouTube channel, and see me live. Please go. I'd love for you to go and show up and, share the channel, like the channel, and what else? Subscribe to the channel. It's a good thing. I'd appreciate it. So that's the Naked Truth Report YouTube channel. Also, the other thing I want to say, did you hear the ad from Dr. Claude Anderson? You guys know that, I love Dr. Claude Anderson. I want to start having meaningful conversations about race in America. And to have those meaningful conversations, you got to read his books. He's offering a library pack, 5 books for $99. You can't beat it. The books are Powernomics, A Black History Reader. That was the last one I read. Black Labor, White Wealth, Dirty Little Secrets, and More Dirty Little Secrets. So it's a special deal. You can get those 5 books for $99. I encourage you to get it. And then when you call to talk to me about race, you'll be able to speak with me about it. You will be able to engage in a dialogue with me about it in a meaningful way, in an informed way. This is important, yes. So when I think about race, I also, what I was thinking about today? I was watching Mo Alithi on Fox News. He's there quite frequently. He's a Democratic strategist or something like that. And what I was thinking is that many of the folks who are on television representing Black interests, or rather I should say they're representing Democrat interests. They're not Native Black Americans. That's the term I use. Native Black Americans are Americans who are the direct descendants of slaves. So Mo Alithi, I don't think he's a Native Black American. We know Joanne Reed isn't, right? So they're not speaking from the same vantage point of folks who have been in the country for generations, since the 1600s, 1700s, early 1800s. I know, a lot of them are either African immigrants or first-generation Americans. Have you noticed that? And they're supposed to be talking about the interests of Black Americans. And also, I want to say, there's one other thing. I have a guest, Professor Wilfred Reilly. He was my guest, 2 weeks ago. Professor Wilfred Reilly is professor of political science at Kentucky State University. And his book is Hate Crime Hoax. And he's going to come on again and talk about the Jussie Smollett issue, what's the newest developments in that, and also his new book, Taboo. But another thing, before he comes on, there's another thing I want to mention. I want to mention that a lot of folks that talk about Black Americans and our woes, or how we've been relegated to a permanent underclass and how that must be remedied, they always blame white America or white supremacy, I find. And I understand that. But, I think since the Civil Rights Act, or that movement, I think that Black folks must take responsibility. I think that we have been led astray. We have been sent to the abyss. We're at the abyss, or we're on the precipice by Black leaders. Black leaders have done this, because, remember, we did have 87% two-parent families. Remember, we had 40% of our businesses during Jim Crow. Now we're regressing. This is something I want to talk to Professor Reilly about, if he agrees with me, because I think the onus is on, no one else is going to take care of Black Americans. No one else is going to take care of Native Black Americans but us. We should be more invested in that than anyone. That's my position. That's the position I take. And an example of how we've been led astray, are on the precipice, are relegated to a permanent underclass, are regressing, are failing, or however you want to say, is the fact that at Al Sharpton's National Action Network, the Democrat, like for instance, I mean, like what? Like Al Sharpton actually represents or reflects the interest of Native Black Americans. Who did he have up there speaking? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Why was she there? Why was she there? You see how everything is twisted and confused? Because let me tell you, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is for open borders. And Julio Castro is for decriminalizing illegal aliens. And these are the people that, it's just a confused mess. That's all I want to say. It's a confused mess. Also, one other thing I want to mention before I bring on the professor is that Devin Nunes has made a criminal referral of eight people to the Department of Justice. I'm excited to see how this plays out. I hope it plays out the way us Trump supporters want it to play out, off with their head, right? Anyway, let me welcome Professor Wilfred Reilly to the Naked Truth Report. Hi, Professor Reilly, welcome. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Anyway, I want to welcome you to the Naked Truth Report. So give us I'm speaking with Professor Wilfred Reilly, who is the author of the book, Hate Crime Hoax. It was timely because what happened? The Jussie Smollett affair. So what is give us the update, the latest with Jussie Smollett.
Well, there's been a lot going on with Brother Jussie. I think the thing that everyone noticed in the case that I've talked the most about on media over the past couple of weeks is that all of the charges in the Jussie Smollett case were dropped. And the general perspective for me and from most people in the legal community is that was an extremely bizarre decision. So obviously in this case where Jussie Smollett staged a hate crime hoax, I mean, there's no real doubt about that. There was literally a video of the two Nigerian guys who were involved in the case, the Osundario brothers, buying red hats, ski masks, lengths of rope at a local Ace Hardware a couple days before the assault. And if any of your listeners are curious, you can literally find that just by Googling video shows brothers linked to Smollett attack buying weapons. I mean, that's from national CBS. It's still live on YouTube. The brothers themselves have said repeatedly that Smollett paid them to attack him. There are, I believe, written confessions. CPD, the Chicago police have. The police have a signed check from Jussie Smollett to the brothers for the exact cost of the attack. He wrote them a check. Mm-hmm. So when the charges were dropped, a lot of people were absolutely baffled. Mm-hmm. The mayor came out and said that this was one of the worst legal decisions he'd ever seen. Rahm Emanuel, the leftist, but kind of aggressive mayor of Chicago. The police chief, Eddie Johnson, sort of solid, good cop, said this was a whitewash of justice. This was nonsensical. And even the prosecutors themselves never really said that they thought Smollett was. Jussie Smollett forfeited at least $10,000 in bond. His entire bond amount was turned over to the county of Cook, which isn't something innocent men generally do. The technique used to drop the charges wasn't a not guilty finding. It wasn't a verdict of any kind. It was what's called a nolle prosequi, which is a technical dismissal that's often used with guilty defendants. I've actually asked Attorney Moggetts, who's second or third in the Cook County DA's office, whether he believed that Smollett was innocent or whether kind of the fix was in. And there's a famous picture in Chicago of him sort of grimacing at the camera and saying, no, I think we could have proven these charges. So the question first is why the DA, why the pros let essentially a guilty man go? I think that's the question on most people's minds. And then after this happened, after the charges were dropped, the circus really came to town. There were allegations that one of President Obama's staffers, Michelle Obama's chief of staff, had called the prosecutor, Kim Foxx, and had asked first that the FBI be brought in to investigate the case, and then later whether there was any chance for kind of mercy for Mr. Smollett. You had the Prosecutors Bar Association in Illinois and the Statewide Association of Police Chiefs call for a formal investigation. So they're threatening disbarment. It's a circus. There's a lot going on.
Yeah,
Pretty
and
entertaining stuff.
yeah, it's been most So I saw the press conference that Kim Fox aired when she was there was marching or a protest segment with Jussie Jackson, and she said that this was common, that she put Jussie into a diversion or deferred program, and this was common, something that they frequently did.
Well, the issue with that, so first of all, plea bargains are a problem in the criminal justice system. I think that most people who are not lawyers by background or who aren't police officers, Leos by background, kind of imagine that if you're charged with a crime and it's at all serious, you have 12 angry men. I mean, you go all the way to a jury trial. There are lawyers stumping around like Johnny Cochran or F. Lee Bailey. There's a dignified presiding judge with a shock of white hair. That's generally not what happens. About 95% of criminal cases are plea bargained. So if you're charged with domestic violence, you're going to be allowed to plead down to misdemeanor battery so you don't have a felony record. What makes this case so different, though, was that there was no plea bargain. A plea bargain is made between a defense lawyer and a prosecutor with the approval of a judge, very crudely put there. But in this case, the prosecutor herself essentially decided to act as judge and jury. So what she did essentially was drop the charges and keep Mr. Smollett's bond amount as though he were paying a fine. And because this was just the prosecutor making this call, and as I understand, you have a legal background here. I mean, because of that, none of the usual stuff that goes into a plea bargain happened. So in a plea bargain situation, it's very important the defendant admit guilt. Certainly, he's almost always going to enter a plea of guilty. Jussie Smollett didn't have to do that. Immediately after he left the courtroom, he gave this ridiculous speech where he said, best believe I'm going to keep standing up for the rights of marginalized people. It's good to be vindicated. And that's one of the reasons. And
he also said that he told the truth the entire time.
Yeah, he said all kinds of ridiculous crap. I mean, that's why that's why the story got a new set of legs. If the judge, the DA, this good solid attorney that Smollett had, and the pros had sat down and said, okay, we're going to give this guy 1 month. He's going to pay $5,000. If they had done something very similar through proper channels, no one would have cared. The weird thing was that prosecutor, out of nowhere, announced that she was dropping all of her own office's charges and did not force Smollett to claim guilt in any way. And in fact, there were a bunch of other weird features of this case. Jussie Smollett's case file was sealed by the court. So you can't go on to, in Illinois, it's judici.com, the LawWire database. You can't access the records of that case. That's very rare. That's something you'd see, as you know, in child pornography matters or something like that. Smollett was not forced to ever state guilt. He wasn't convicted of anything. So a lot of people viewed this as kind of a travesty of justice. Not the biggest deal, but kind of a ridiculous way to close a case that had been on front pages around the country.
Right, because there was so much media hype over it. Oh my God, the world is just enveloped with white supremacy. And this was an example.
Downtown Chicago.
Right. And this is an example. And see, this is why it has to be. And then to find out it's a hoax, that ties into your book, Hate Crime Hoax. So what do you think will there be federal charges brought? What do you anticipate?
I think it's quite possible. I mean, President Trump went on Twitter, maybe not the best platform for that, but an effective one if you want to reach a big audience, and said, I'm having the FBI and the DOJ investigate. And that wasn't an empty boast. I mean, both of those organizations have stated that they're going to be looking into the case. I think that if I were considering prosecuting this case, I would look at federal felony mail fraud. That's a bit technical, but this case has roots. So Jussie Smollett has claimed that there's been an epidemic of hate crimes against him, and that's kind of gotten lost in the Nigerian brothers thing. But remember, he said that months ago, someone mailed a letter to him that was full of these horrible, threatening words and images, that was full of crushed up white powder. I believe there was a depiction of him being hung. So he claimed that some outside party sent this to him. And I believe it was the Osundaria brothers that said, no, he sent that to himself. We're 95 to 100% certain of that. So, I mean, if the FBI can look at that letter, which I believe is in Chicago police custody, and they find Jussie Smollett's fingerprints on it, or the feds have better tools than even the best local police department. If they found Jussie Smollett's viable DNA on it, then there's a very serious charge that can be brought there. So, yeah, I think there's at least a chance of federal charges. I also think there will be some consequences for Kim Foxx. I mean, she's coming up for election inside a year. The Prosecutors Bar Association wants her essentially disbarred. So I don't think this is over. No, I think the whole circus is going to continue. Yeah. As you mentioned, there were pro and anti Smollett protests on the same day that almost came to blows. So this is still very much an active thing in Chicago.
And, you know, this goes back, and Jesse Jackson was involved. And in fact, Jussie Smollett was supposed to be, you know, this goes back to my opening about how Black folk, my people, must take some responsibility for being either led astray or believing in the Jesse Jacksons and the Al Sharptons. They have brought us here to where we're regressing, at least since the civil rights movement. So my position is, and you know, Jesse Jackson is the one that came up with that term African American, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, I've interviewed Jesse Jackson actually. And to me, the idea, anything Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson are involved in, we should run away from. We know it's not kosher. We should know it's not cool. We should do the exact opposite if Jesse or Al are involved. And you see Al Sharpton had at his National Action Network, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's the last person that needs, because this woman is saying that she wants to put a Green New Deal before Black Americans. That she even said that she was of African descent herself.
Well, she also said she was Jewish, remember? I mean,
right.
Ben Shapiro took her to task for that. She spoke to the American Hebrew Association or something like that and said, well, my ancestors come from Cordova, so they were Jews.
Right.
I mean, so she's almost every major race.
Right. She's got everything covered to make sure she gets... Go ahead.
No, but in terms of what you're saying, I think there's obviously some truth there. As I've said before, I'm not a rampant political partisan, although the Democrats are looking crazier and crazier this year. But the basic idea of it's really is this simple. There used to be brutal and horrific racism in the USA. The races fought each other, sometimes with weapons. I mean, I am Black, white, and Native, and relatives of mine literally were involved in Indian raids against the white man in, say, the 1890s. This was relatively recent. But there's a but here. In 1954, the USA formally desegregated with Brown v. Board. 1965, as you pointed out, was the Civil Rights Act. It's literally illegal to be racist. 1967 was the start of pro-minority affirmative action. So at my alma mater and Jesse Jackson's, the University of Illinois, the average Black student, who's pretty well qualified, but the average Black student is accepted with an ACT or an SAT at least 150 points below the average white student. There's a huge empirical advantage. So at some point, you do have to stop saying racism is the only problem. Every problem in our community, incarceration, for example, is caused by racism. There are three really big problems with that. First of all, most of these problems did not exist at the same level when racism was much worse. When whites and blacks literally were beating each other over the head with weapons.
Right.
If you want to look at illegitimacy, and you always do a great job at this, but the illegitimacy rate for 1959, what was it, 14% for blacks, 6% for whites? That's, what's it now, 74% for blacks, 38% for whites?
Exactly.
There's no way that difference, that 500% increase for both races could be due to ethnic conflict. That's just not a possibility.
Right.
You could look, if you are a fan of the racism hypothesis, although I don't think you are, you could argue, well, okay, look, the difference between 40% and 70%, that could be due to racism. But my immediate comeback would be, well, the real question is, why did both races have this problem increase by 1,000% when we stopped fighting each other? Ethnic conflict's not the explanation for that. Another piece of proof that ethnic conflict's not the explanation for that is that foreign blacks don't have these problems.
Exactly.
Many of the wealthiest groups in this country are people like dark-skinned Indian Americans, Nigerian Americans, Southern Japanese Americans. These are visibly non-white, dark brown-skinned people, Lebanese Americans. So again, if racism is so pervasive in America, why doesn't it affect Nigerians? Why does it only affect us? And you could go on with this. Poor whites, as point three, do have the same problems that working class blacks do. Our illegitimacy rate in the area of Kentucky where I live is about 55%. It's almost all working class white kids. And you see the same culture. They're great basketball players down here, University of Kentucky. I mean, so I think the issue in society right now is that there was a kind of structural collapse of a lot of the institutions in the USA in the maybe you'd say late 1960s to mid 1970s, when you saw the development of pay per child welfare. That was a big one. No fault divorce and the normalization of illegitimacy. That was something that quote unquote good girls didn't do until relatively recently. Historically, men also were expected to take care of their kids or someone would kill them with a shotgun. So no fault divorce, the normalization of illegitimacy, kind of the rise of this ineffective policing. 1960s, as someone who studies criminal justice, was the start of community policing. The idea was that you had to look at the root causes of crime, which were things like racial prejudice. So people stopped arresting criminals and crime increased 500%, 1965, 1994. And to that, you'd have to add the outsourcing of blue-collar jobs, which devastated communities from white Allentown. There's a song about the poor place to black Detroit. So that collapse occurred. And I think so the cause of the problems in the black community mostly is that collapse. But this focus on racism has made it much, much worse. Because nobody's talking about the real issues. Almost everything is blamed on the white man.
Right. They're not talking about the real issues. This is what, because, I listen to folks talk about all they say, white supremacy. They never talk about fatherless homes. You see, even if there is,
agree.
Like my grandfather, and I've said this before on the show, my grandfather was born in 1895. These folks today talk like racism is worse than 1895. And no one's going to buy it. And,
I agree. I think, sorry, go on.
And the Al Sharptons and the Jesse Jacksons and all the Congressional Black Caucus, they've made bad decisions. They've led black folks wrong to the abyss. They did the wrong things. They embraced the wrong policies. They were not reflecting or representing the interest of Native Black Americans. This is what I say. And so this, it's just it's very complicated, but it has to be cleaned up. It has to be straightened out because Native Black Americans are facing zero median wealth because of all these policies and all these things all mixed in together, being an utter failure for Native Black Americans. And so Native Black Americans will be facing zero median wealth by 2053. That's a problem.
It is a problem. I think, by the way, I do think I'm not a doomsayer when it comes to these issues. I think that Black Americans have made substantial strides since the 50s, but with the one problem of that social collapse I've described. So if you look at the average...
Oh, wait, let me, there's my music. We're going to go to a break. And when we come back, you can finish your thought. And I'd like to open up the phone call. If you'd like to call in and ask Professor Wilfred Reilly a question, you can do that. So this is Professor Wilfred Reilly. His book is Hate Crime Hoax. And we'll be right back. Oh, hi. Thank you. Thank you. Can you guys hear that? Can you hear that?
Protracted problems of racism in America and offers how-to solutions for its demise. I'm a frequent guest on Kathleen Wells' Naked Truth Report, a popular show.
Huh? But can they hear it? No. You say what? Oh, oh. He says regulate it. Regulate it. Welcome back. My guest is Professor Wilfred Reilly, and his book is Hate Crime Hoax. Check it out. Hate Crime Hoax. So Professor Reilly. Oh, first, before I bring him back on, I want to say, don't forget to go to Powernomics, Powernomics, and get the 5-pack Dr. Claude Anderson's 5 books. A Black History Reader, Powernomics, Dirty Little Secrets, More Dirty Little Secrets, and Black Labor, White Wealth, Powernomics.com. And also check out ustechworkers.org. If you're a tech worker, please get involved with that organization, ustechworkers.org. So, Professor Reilly, finish your thought. Do you remember it?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last line.
Oh, do you remember your thought? What you were talking about before we went to break?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So I think that there are a couple of different things going on. It's important not to fall into, and I don't think you are, the trap of arguing that the civil rights movement was a bad thing for Black people. You sometimes hear that from Black conservatives. You sometimes hear that from the Muslim brothers.
Well, I kind of think it was. I mean, you look at the data, and we've regressed since then.
I don't. There's a very important distinction there. The average individual black person certainly hasn't. So if you look at income for an individual, I mean, for example, in 1950, let's say, the average black woman made 36% of what the average white woman did.
Mm.
So most black women, a lot of the aunts and so on in my family were domestics, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You had some housekeepers, slightly different. You had a good number of maids. You had some cooks, some owners of small restaurants. Right now, the average black woman makes 94% of what the average white woman does. And if you adjust for college education, black women make more.
Mm.
Black women, including yourself, are a great success story in the United States. So I don't think it's accurate to say at the individual level, things were better when you had the Watts riots going on our side or the Klan riding around, something, white America has atoned for. So,
yeah, but when I think of wealth, and the, for instance, the median wealth, when I take Black America as a whole, like black men the median wealth for black men in Boston is $8. When you take the wealth of whites and the wealth of black Americans, it's like $1,000. So, I mean, taking the whole. And so you said the individuals are doing better, but we're concerned about the wealth of all of Black America, not individuals.
The wealth of all of Black America. If you look at the GDP for Black America, that's also steadily increased for the past 50 years. And it is worth checking that out. Just GDP of Black America, number of Black billionaires. If you look at Michael Jordan, Oprah Winfrey, people you'd never suspect, like Bob Johnson, quiet, low-key publisher worth multiple billions of dollars. I think, though, you have a point there. I don't think the civil rights movement was at all a bad thing for Black people. If you look at the number of Black people in Congress or in powerful political roles, number of Black billionaires, average income for a Black woman, number of Black people that can read, all those things have gone up dramatically.
No, but the number of Blacks in Congress is just irrelevant. It's symbolic because they don't pursue our interests, you see.
Well, I would agree with a lot of that, since so many of them are liberal, large city Democrats. But overall, though, the basic figure, income for Black people has gone from 36% to 94% of income for white people, really can't be ignored. Now, there's some problems with our spending habits. Mm-hmm. If you've got an income that's 95% that of a well-off Caucasian individual, and you've got $8 in the bank, I mean, some of that's on you, and I think we agree on that. Mm-hmm. But to me, there's one issue underlying all this, and that is that sort of social collapse in America that I've described. Mm-hmm. So the real problem for Black people is household income. Mm-hmm. Nobody denies that the income for Black men and Black women has increased dramatically, although Black men do need to step our game up a little bit. That's only about 85% of what Caucasians make. Mm. The problem is that people now live in smaller households. So you're absolutely right that in 1950, almost every Black family, 87%, would be a mother, father, married couple household. Mm-hmm. And this wasn't just us. So in almost every white family, Hispanic, Italian family, that was what was expected to exist, expected to occur. Mm-hmm. Right now, the illegitimacy rate for Black kids is 74%. Mm-hmm. Whites don't have as high an illegitimacy rate, but I'll tell you their divorce rate is 55%. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So when you have that, mm-hmm. the two largest ethnic groups in the country with 50% divorce rates and 60% illegitimacy rates and so on, you're going to have a real problem with wealth. This is true for working class whites too.
Right.
Because you've taken that stable family and you've broken it up into these autonomous people. Mm-hmm. Dad trying to live on his own and pay child support twice a month. So I think the civil rights movement was a great thing, but what we need to do now is go to some principles. I think these are mostly conservative principles that can fix the collapse that occurred in the country at around the same time. To have a functional country, you need everything I just mentioned. You need jobs, especially blue-collar jobs. You need strong policing. You need stable families. And you need a sort of sense of national unity. Religion, I find, helps with that, among a number of other things, military service. So the Civil Rights Act, the basic idea that you can work any job if you're Black is good. And we made a lot of money as a result of that. It also benefited white America. I care about the whole country. But now we need to fix the problems that also developed during that kind of tumultuous 1960s era. We can't ignore those problems. We can't pretend that a 70% illegitimacy rate is due to racism.
Oh, no, I agree with you there. I completely agree. Why don't we take a call? I agree. The family is the most important institution in society, and you're not going to make it without a daddy in the home. I agree with that. I say that all the time. Why don't we take a call from Ronnie in Beverly Hills? Hi, Ronnie.
Hi, Kathleen, Dr. Reilly. I think we're on the same page from my point of view. And as someone who writes books and known as the world's first psychoanalyst, I would ask that you look at the word pace instead of race. And I think if we shift the dynamics of the word that we use, we shift the width, the word image design through habit. So if you take the word pace, policies advancing citizens' economics, I think together we're on the same focus, whereby we're looking at the realities instead of looking down at what is and not is, if you make any sense of what I'm saying. I think if we just look at the word pace instead of race, we can measure and see a different dynamic.
You have a response, Professor Reilly?
Well, I think that, obviously, when you talk about, what I get from that is that there are other issues, like financial issues, that underlie, for example, the politics of race. And I totally agree with that. I used the subtitle Selling a Fake Race War for a very specific reason. And that is that one of the big narratives in politics today, especially on the political left, is that there's this enormous amount of conflict. So all of these programs, affirmative action, minority set-asides, the budgets for these giant activist groups, as we talked about last time on the show, Southern Poverty Law Center, which is currently going through all kinds of structural issues, but has endowment of $500 million. The justification for all that is that there's still a massive amount of brutal racism and sexism and homophobia and so on down the line. So since there often isn't in a typical city on a year-by-year basis, I do feel that a lot of activists essentially stage these incidents to make the point that this is still happening. So that's why I use the term fake race war. It's kind of the selling of a type of violence that doesn't really happen, in my opinion, all that often. And to some extent, that's an extreme positive. If there's so little actual racial hatred in the USA that, for example, Jussie Smollett had to pay 2 black guys to beat him up, that's a good thing. We've come a long way, baby.
Well, but I also want to say that it really bothers me that we are 40% of the homeless in Los Angeles. It really bothers me that illegal aliens are, we're at a crisis point at our border. It really bothers me that, Black America is, it really bothers me that illegal aliens have 90% of the construction jobs in Los Angeles. This is meaningful.
Yeah, I think, this gets into the idea of the big tent or the large coalition. And Republicans sometimes have this problem, too, when you get into sort of the CEO of Bain Capital and a small town preacher have to try to figure out principles they all agree on. But on the Democratic side, I think that the leftist side, I think the unifying principle is this idea that you are fighting oppression. So everyone that can claim to be, everyone that can claim to be oppressed has the same interests. So if you watch a major center-left leftist political event, like you mentioned that the keynote speaker at what began as a Black civil rights event was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which strikes me as a bit bizarre.
It's bizarre.
If you watch one of these events, one of the consistent themes is gays and Muslims have a shared set of interests. Illegal immigrants and construction workers or union members have a shared set of interests. My favorite is feminists and transgender people have a shared set of interests. So in reality, you're absolutely right that for either poor whites or African Americans, 2 groups that I care about because of the area I live in, an influx of very hardworking, not especially skilled in the traditional sense, construction trades guys is going to take jobs. It's very hard to even have this conversation with an intelligent leftist, though, because they'll immediately return to the default of, Blacks and Hispanics are on the same side. Blacks and Hispanics are on the same side.
Right.
So, the claim is that what you really have to do is take the money from the white guys who have it hidden in a Scrooge McDuck-style money vault or whatever. I agree. Massive illegal immigration is a bad thing for working class men.
Our borders are literally at the breaking point. And I take the position that multiculturalism does not work. In Los Angeles, Somalians are not rolling with Mexicans. It's not happening. So anyway, talk to my listeners about this book, your new book, Taboo. What's that about?
Well, Taboo, in the book Hoax, Actually, one very quick comment there. I think that diversity is a good thing. I think multiculturalism isn't. So diversity is what happens when you just have a bunch of people that are of different colors or perhaps slightly different religions, but all share the same animating ideal. The Roman Empire did a great job of this.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, obviously, I don't think that the NFL the National Football League, is made worse by the fact that you have both white and black athletes at different positions. I don't think the Army is made worse by the fact that you have people at different IQ levels or with different specializations or something like that. So a diversity of people with background, job skills, or national origins, races for that matter, is often good. Multiculturalism is what happens when you tell everyone they don't have to assimilate and come together.
Right.
So if you have 1,000 people in a military unit and 100 of them are from Somalia by background, as long as you train them to be Americans, I don't think that's a positive or a negative. If anything, it's a positive. If you tell the people from that different ethnic background that they don't have to change or assimilate at all, then, for example, you might stop a training exercise to pray 3 times during a 6-hour period. That is going to cause tension. That is going to cause conflict. So racial and gender diversity is in general good. If you just have if you work in a sales floor as a sales director for a while, and you have black and Jewish and Asian American salesmen, you're going to get into large new audiences and make money. But if those people are allowed to behave completely differently from the rest of the salesmen, are allowed to say show up an hour late, you're going to have conflict. So diversity, good, okay to good. Multiculturalism, bad.
Yeah,
but the new book
in Los Angeles, black men have to speak Spanish now to get a service job. You see,
well, that's
not
what I mean by multiculturalism.
Right, exactly. That's not cool at all.
Yeah, I mean, so I've actually, no soy fluente, pero se habla español bastante bueno por americano, because I lived for a bit in Latin America, and to live in Latin America as a business class citizen, I was there with AFS, the Overseas Operating Agency, you're expected to speak Spanish.
Exactly.
You can't just walk around talking louder and louder in English to people or they'll laugh at you. So, I mean, to me, a lot of this, like I said, I'm personally pretty conservative, but not really all that partisan one way or another.
Right.
But to me, a lot of this is just obvious. These aren't really even political issues. Like, if you ask, should the country have a national language on the right? Or do nations have a right to defend their borders on the right? Or for that matter, on the left, should we stop poisoning the planet so we can hunt with our kids? These seem to be things that everyone should agree on. No one should say, no, I'm against the national language and I'm for poisoning the planet, by God.
Right.
But yeah, there's no you're going to have, recollecting my thoughts. This actually is one of my papers that I published about a year and a half back. I look at how diversity affects conflict. So different types of conflict in a country, like the murder rate, the number of terrorist incidents, the chance of civil war. And I found something fascinating. Racial diversity has no effect on conflict, positive or negative, except that there's a tiny increase in the homicide rate. So if you have assimilated Asian Americans or something like that in the USA, you're not going to see an increase in crime or hostility or any other problem, really. Slight decline in social trust, but slight improvement in average income. So just a bunch of people who are all assimilated and speak the same language that are different colors, that doesn't matter, or it's a positive. What caused a massive amount of conflict, though, it was the single biggest predictor of civil war, was unassimilated linguistic and cultural diversity.
Hello.
So, can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, I'm saying like, hello, you know that. But isn't that obvious? I'm saying hello, like, isn't that obvious? Yeah.
Yeah, no, but that literally was what we found, that in countries where you had, like, the classic example is the former Yugoslavia, which fell apart. If you have different groups of people, and they're all the same race over there, they're all basically white guys.
Right.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. But if you have people and you start teaching them to be incredibly proud of their little tribe, you teach them how to sew Serbian flags in school, and they all speak different languages. They cheer for different soccer football teams. It's going to be very, very easy for them to develop into gang fighting as they're teenagers and then war down the road.
Right.
So teaching people to follow different flags, worship different deities, speak different languages, that is bad for the structure of a country, although everyone should be bilingual in that high school French kind of way.
Right.
But just having people of different races, obviously different sexes is an extraordinary positive, different social classes is a positive. That kind of diversity isn't bad at all. But you move into the multicultural zone where you argue every culture is equal, so we can't make people from other cultures do anything.
Right. In fact, I just learned that Okinawa is on, it's on the, they have a different dialect or different language from the mainland in Japan. I didn't know that before. And there's animosity between those two groups. The Japanese on,
and that's amazing because this is two groups of Japanese.
Right.
I mean, so that's a pretty assimilated, peaceful country over there, like most of the major Asian states.
Well, I saw on Anthony Bourdain's program on CNN, they said during World War II, when the Okinawas were not speaking the proper or national language, they were penalized, even killed.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. And actually, this is kind of a positive for racial diversity. Mm-hmm. So it turns out that people fight, it's called the group one standard deviation away. Mm-hmm. So in every society, you have a certain range of people in the population. And you don't really see a difference between the level of violence in a society where that range is between black and white, and a society where that range is just between Catholic and Protestant among white. Mm-hmm. So the technical mathematical way of putting this is the larger the variance within a data set grows, the larger the standard deviation gets. Mm-hmm. So in a diverse society, people tend to fight a little bit along racial lines. But if you removed all racial diversity, those same people would then fight along tribal lines. Mm-hmm. So Irishmen and Italians used to knock each other's heads in the USA. It was largely competition with newly arriving immigrants and with blacks that made them unify as white.
And we can think of Rwanda, the Rwandans. The Tutsis and
that's an all black country. They were fighting because of height.
Right. Can you imagine?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I actually can. I mean, I'm obviously, I'm way too old and slow to get in fist fights and that sort of thing. But I mean, thinking back to high school, if you wore your letter jacket into another city, I was an athlete in high school, you could expect to get into a physical fight. Mm-hmm. People very, very, even in Chicago, if I went into the center city to play a team, I mean, you'd walk 2 blocks over, people have a problem with it. Mm-hmm. People would take them off and put them on the bus if we wanted to make a good impression. So, I mean, it's just that sort of thing. And we, on the other hand, be as flamboyant as possible if we wanted to sort of look strong, make a statement. So, I mean, that sort of thing, people will fight each other because they recognize kind of the enemy flag. That is a human universal. And race is one possible enemy flag, sure. I mean, no one denies that in addition to a lot of positives, racial diversity can cause tensions. But so is religion, so is social class, so is ethnicity. Actually, that causes more of an issue than race. But what we do find is that there are some things that are almost always bad, like encouraging people to speak different foreign tongues, mm-hmm. or encouraging people to try to break away from the country.
Right.
These things tend to be negative. And with a lot of multiculturalism, you get these idiotic questions like, who are we to tell people not to speak, Pashtun in the middle schools? And the answer is, well, we're Americans. We tell everyone they have to speak the same language and wear the blue polo shirt to school and so on. So you do need that central, if you have a diverse society, mm-hmm. you're probably going to be richer and more competitive than a non-diverse little society like Iceland or Haiti. Mm-hmm. But you're also going to have to recognize that you've got to tamp down potential tensions among people by giving people as much shared identity as possible.
Right.
And military, sport.
And there will be animosity when people are coming into the country who are not even legal and getting benefits and others are not. Yeah.
Well,
that's natural animosity. I don't know why the left can't get that. You know what I mean?
Well, the illegal immigration thing, I said on a talk show pretty recently, all the Democrats would have to do to beat Trump in 2020 probably is not be crazy. I mean, Trump has been a flamboyant, controversial president. I like a lot of the stuff he's done, but a lot of people don't. All the Democrats have to do is run Joe Biden, get Colin Powell out of retirement to run with him, win by 5. They're not going to do that. So what you've seen is a move toward ever crazier positions, I think it's fair to say, in the Democratic Party.
Oh, so I hear my music. I got to let you go, but we're going to have you back on, Professor Reilly, to talk about your new book. We didn't get to it, Taboo, right?
But we will, yes.
Yeah, well, I'll have you back on soon to talk about Taboo because we didn't get to it. You and I can talk forever. I appreciate you being on the show. This is a Naked Truth Report. My guest was Professor Wilfred Reilly. Don't forget to go to Powernomics and purchase that 5-pack books for $99. Okay, thank you. See you next week. Thank you, Professor Reilly. We'll be in touch and I'll have you on again soon to talk about Taboo. Okay? Bye.